I am Youngmoo Kim. I direct a lab called the Music and Entertainment Technology Lab at Drexel. So what we do spans a really wide range of things. Some of it certainly directly applies to gaming, and we do some direct game applications. Some of it would be considered perhaps more middleware type applications. And then some of it is just pure research, and it's really technologies that might affect gaming in the future, but is really stuff that's a little bit over the horizon. Just a little bit about my background. I studied both engineering and music, so I have a real passion for music and music technology and also music performance. So I like to think that I know a little bit of something about music, and my students will often disagree with me about that. But some of them are out there heckling me. Hopefully they didn't bring me fruit. But I also, after I did my doctorate at a lab called the MIT Media Lab, which was really the convergence, and convergence between technology and the creative arts. And it seemed almost like it was planned, but it was totally not planned. I just couldn't decide which one I wanted to do. I loved music, I loved engineering and computer science, and was able to bring them together, hopefully in an interesting way. After I finished at MIT, I actually worked for a startup company called Nellie Moser that no one's ever heard of. We were based in Boston, and we did quite a few different things. First we were a mobile music company before there was an iPhone. So basically no market whatsoever, but learned a lot about mobile development. But secondly, the more relevant thing is that we were actually the middleware provider for PlayStation and Xbox Online. We provided the voice communication. So anytime you've used Xbox Live or PlayStation Online and used voice communication, you're using our stuff. Now we weren't really getting paid for it, but you were still using our stuff, so that was kind of nice. So I certainly have a strong interest in audio and music as it applies to gaming, and I've seen the technology trends evolve tremendously over the past 15, 20, 30 years. It's really hard to explain what my lab does anymore. It used to take like 2 sentences, and now it takes 5 minutes or even 30 minutes at a whole presentation. So I'm going to try to give you a couple of snapshots of some of the projects that we find interesting. We try to categorize our work into one of 4 areas, and I'll touch upon most of these today. The first is what I call tools for musical expression. How can we use technology to create music? And to let those, particularly not necessarily with a strong background in music, but to still have creative participation in music making. We have an unfortunate situation in this country where we've had a couple generations now of students who are educated through the public education system who haven't had much exposure to music and music training and music performance. So it's kind of sad to say that, well, if you haven't picked up an instrument, by the time you're in your, teens or 20s, that you might not have a chance to. So everyone still loves music, everyone still listens to music, and I feel like people actually want to participate and have creative expression through music, and so we try to use technology to enable that. The second is what we call machine listening, teaching computers to understand sound the way that we do. Computers are really good at recording and playing back sound, really not very good, in fact kind of dumb in how they understand sound, how they process sound, in things that are very simple for us. Finding, tapping our foot to the beat to music, identifying genres. So you flip on the radio, tune it to a random station, in a couple seconds you can tell me, oh, that's a classical station, that's a jazz station, that's a pop station. Teaching a computer to make those distinctions is actually quite difficult. So we explore some interesting problems in that space. And the third really relevant area, I think, for the future of gaming is what we're exploring in terms of music interfaces, and I include robots in this, because robots are really just a physical extension of the computer as well. The fourth, which I'm not really going to talk about today at all, but certainly impacts the community, is really central to, I think, the vision, Nathan's vision for Philadelphia Game Lab as well, is education and outreach, using technology to actually reach more students and to inspire people and teach basic coding skills and other core engineering and scientific skills and mathematics as well. All right, let me just dive in. I don't know why this slide came up that wasn't supposed to come up. So I'm just going to skip right past this. There we go. So just a quick example. We do a lot of app development, and this came about as a senior design project at Drexel. We wanted to make our content a little more interactive. Right now, you download a song from iTunes or maybe BitTorrent, and you listen to that song a couple times, 10 times, 20 times, 100 times, 1,000 times. It's never going to change, right? It is a static recording, right? Whereas, we prefer things to be much more interesting, dynamic. Why do you go see live performance? Because it's different, right? A good live band on tour will play the song differently every single time. It might play it in dramatically different ways. So we wanted to enable an application that could allow an individual to explore the expressive range of space. So this is a really simple mock-up interface here, but what it is, it's an emotional interface. And this is actually from psychology research. There's two axes. Top to bottom is sort of positive to negative emotions. We call that valence. So you can think of it as happy to sad, top to bottom. And then left to right is intensity. So kind of top right is happy and intense. So that's like joy. Bottom left is sad and depressing. So we wanted to allow someone without any musical experience to remix their music according to emotion. This is the happy bouncy version. And the coffee house version. The angry version.
It's times like these you learn to live again. It's times like these you live again. It's times like these you learn to love again. It's times like these, time and time again.
So that's the trick here is we can't do this with just any song. We actually recorded new content for this. So it's a remixing application. We're taking source tracks and combining them, hopefully in interesting ways. And we actually are now working with music producers. Drexel is a little bit unique in that we actually run a record label. Right? We have a label called Mad Dragon Records, and we have actual artists signed to this label. So we're working with these artists and student producers to develop new content in an interactive app-based format, so that every time you listen to it, it can be a little bit different and much more interesting. And hopefully, I'll go on a little bit of a tangent here. It's kind of a recent phenomenon in the history of music that the recording has dominated, that this one recording has been the example of a work. If you go back in history, of course, that there isn't one recording or one performance of, let's say, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, right, that people point to. There's a composition, and then there's the recording, performances, right? And there are many good performances, probably many bad recordings as well. But the composition and the performance are separate things. And it's only recently that because of recording that we've kind of fused these two things, that a song stands or falls based on what happens in the studio, one producer's vision. And like I said, a good band on tour will play things many, many different ways. Maybe there isn't one singular vision for a song or a composition, that you probably want to engage your fans in multiple ways, present multiple alternatives. And I think I could argue that the compositions that have stood the test of time are the ones that can be performed in many, many different ways. So you think of the jazz standards or other pieces of classic rock or classic pop. I'm going to move on and talk a little bit in trying to get a little more towards gaming now. We do a lot in trying to teach computers to deal intelligently with sound and with music. And so there have been great success recently in music-driven gaming. I mean, you can point to the Guitar Hero Rock Band series, and then of course Pulse and some other follow-up games by Cipher Prime, which are fantastic games. We wanted to develop a little bit of technology that will allow anyone to use songs from their own music library directly in a game. Right now, most of the music games out there right now are dictated by the content provided by the game developers. Right, so Rock Band, you can only play the songs that are coded for the game, and that have been tracked for the game. We wanted you to be able to use any song from your song library. So what we did, we explored this project, and again, I apologize, the ordering here is not my ideal. I'm gonna have to flip around here. We decided to build, again, kind of a set of middleware, a library for Flash developers that could provide really fairly sophisticated audio processing, but in a very easy to use manner. So we're doing all the hard work, all the signal processing for you, and we've actually open sourced this. This is available on Google Code, and it's called the Audio Library for Flash, or ALF. And there's a nice picture of a Muppet on the page as well. And this was work done by several of my grad students, including Raymond Yeka, who's sitting over there, and in collaboration with the gaming lab at Drexel, the replay lab. So what it does is that we actually can take in arbitrary audio. We can take in any MP3 file and analyze it in real time and give the developer the features that they can use to drive gameplay. Again, this was done a while ago before the Pulse moniker had kind of taken on a new meaning, so don't read anything into that. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to pick some I'm going to pick some songs, right? I'm going to go, pick some good songs here, there. Let's pick a couple others from here. All right, I'll apply that. And then you'll see that this is the activity of the music itself is actually driving the game. The object is really simple, just to stay alive. But I'm not doing a real good job of that right now. I'm not a particularly good gamer at this. But if you get in trouble, you can just skip to the next song. And you can see that the features of the song are actually driving the gameplay directly. So it gets more intense, more energetic, the slope gets steeper, the number of enemies increases. All right, so now I'm starting to lose here. I'm going to skip again. And so some of it becomes beat driven. I mean, you can look at the background of the shield area in front here, and it's completely driven by the intensity, which is very closely related to the beat. So, okay, and the nice thing is that you get into trouble, you can skip to the next song. Oh, this is nice and quiet, right? I can just collect some coins here, build up some powers, and then again, the song gets more intense, the gameplay completely changes. So this is an Adobe Air app, and it's also available in Flash on the web, so it's cross-platform. Anybody can download this off of our website. I'll play one more song here. So we can take classic video game music, and again, this is all happening in real time. And if I get hit enough times, I get pushed back, and then I fall off the ramp and I die. So. But you should all go home, download it, try it with songs from your library. Tell us songs that work, tell us songs that don't work. I mean, it's a different kind of gameplay, right? Because if you know the music well, then you can anticipate things. You can say, okay, well, I know the chorus is really intense, so I'm going to try to, take more chances during the verse where it's less intense, fewer enemies, and then kind of be more conservative during parts of the song. So it really changes how you might approach a game. And again, we're analyzing that audio in real time as it's happening, so we're getting features that relate to certain aspects that, we're not getting direct things like beat or notes or key or anything like that. We're taking low-level audio features, but even with that, a good developer can really use that to drive innovative gameplay and create essentially a entirely different level per song or per audio content. Yeah, we already saw that was my backup video. Another thing that we do is actually use games directly in our research. And one of the things we're really interested in is in understanding emotions in music. Music is often called the language of emotion, actually. So we want to build computer systems that can tell you, hey, these are your happy songs, these are your sad songs. Build me a playlist of my happy, upbeat songs because I'm going to go jogging. Or build me a playlist of my sad, depressing songs because, the Red Sox lost again. So whatever your mood suits. So again, this is that same kind of emotional space that I showed you in the iPhone app, but just to give you a little more detail, there's a wide range of emotions that we can express through music, and all of these we can sort of map into positions on this space. But in order to build computer systems that can do this, we need to collect a lot of data from people, because people are the ultimate arbiters, the ultimate decision makers in terms of the emotional content. So in order to do that, we thought, well, we should create a game to encourage people to give us their opinions, right, about music. So we did that. We created a game called Mood Swings. It's a collaborative game. You might have heard of this field called well, again, it has many monikers, but games with a purpose, or serious games is kind of a bigger umbrella term. But really, it's the idea that you can present something in a fun, engaging activity, but it's really contributing back data and other useful information to this process. So here's how the game works. I'll just show you. It's a partner game. So I'm the yellow, and my partner's in red. And I'm trying to give my opinion about where the emotional content is. And the more we overlap, the more points we get. So you're using other people to kind of provide the idiot check, right? You don't want people just out there randomly moving stuff. You're not going to get points that way. You're playing against another person, and so you have to actually put some effort into it until you agree, and the more you overlap, the more points you get. And there's some other features in there, like if you get to a spot first, you get bonus points, so that you're not just playing follow the leader all the time. It's to your advantage to actually try to make a decision before your partner. Yeah. So the fun thing is we collect a lot of data off of this, and we actually used it to train our computer systems, and now we can have the computer be your partner. Computer play the game. So here's another track. Can we turn that up a little bit? So I'm yellow, and the computer's in red. And this is a pretty angry part. But then the intensity changes, and you can see that the computer moved before I did. Right? The computer's actually picked out a new spot, and it's basing this using a machine learning method on all that data we've collected. We've collected data over about 10,000 songs now, and trained the preliminary system. It's not always that good. Sometimes it does things that are crazy or that are just wacky. Let's see what this one does. So here's the player in yellow. And the computer is just kind of picking out a middle spot there.
Was it hard to step down from your throne?
Yeah, the computer doesn't really know what to do with this one, so it's kind of staying in the middle. Okay. But again, that's where gaming can really be used to advance research. You're actually contributing to the research enterprise. So that game is also online. Please go play it. It's not the most exciting game in the world. I'd be the first to admit that. But if you played a couple rounds, you're giving us data, and we're making the system better. And so then we'll eventually have systems that can actually accurately predict from just the music itself, not from genre data or any other artist data, anything like that. From the audio itself, what the emotional content is. One other project that I skipped over earlier that I wanted to show you that's related to this. In terms of building intelligent music systems, we have this project with the Philadelphia Orchestra called iNotes. And what it is, it's a system that's trying to present real-time information about a performance as it's happening. We have this amazing organization, the orchestra, just down, across the street here, actually. And but a lot of folks don't have a lot of experience with classical music. So if you go to a concert and aren't familiar with the forms of classical music, and my students have given me this feedback many times, you go in and say, well, that was nice, 2 hours of nice sounds, but I didn't get it. So we wanted to provide a way that people could get more information, so just a little bit of structure, some context about a piece. And if you don't know that a symphony is usually organized in 3 or 4 movements, that in each movement there might be a primary theme, a secondary theme, a development, a recapitulation. Just knowing that, kind of the structure of things, helps people, giving a roadmap. So we built this system that actually tracks live audio. So because it's live performance, it's unpredictable. You never know what tempos a conductor might take from day to day. We need to take the raw audio and then align that to the musical score. So we can tell you down to the measure number, right? Right now we're in measure 235, and then present the right information for that moment in the music. Much easier to show you than to talk about it. Up the top, you'll see here, just video of a concert, and then bottom left and right are 2 different views from the app. So the left is kind of your traditional slideshow, right? It's kind of programmed out to just spread out over time. On the right is what we call the map, and it really is like a GPS map. The blue dot tells you where you are, so if you're really, really bored, you know how much farther you have to go. But the yellow line, the road of the piece, is also telling you something about the piece. Every time we return to the same vertical position, that's a theme that you've heard before, right? So every time we come back to that bottom level, that's the A theme. And so it gives you a very quick picture of the structure of the piece. So you can say, hey, I've heard this before. And oh, this might be on a different instrument, but that theme is the same. So the idea is to give you a lot of information at a glance, not to distract or detract from the performance. The performance is front and center. You're going to see the Philadelphia Orchestra. You're not going to Verizon Hall to play with your smartphone. But we want to provide a bit of extra information there for people. A little bit of, you can think of it education or information, additional content to support that performance. So that project will actually be deployed in Verizon Hall for orchestra concerts starting next season. For select concerts, if you hate the idea of phones on in the orchestra, don't go to those concerts. But I will say that, pretty soon everybody's phone will be on anyway in the orchestra. Shifting gears a little bit, which I think also has strong relevance for gaming, is our work in music interfaces and also robotics. And right now, robots are a little bit, still, they're becoming more commonplace, but they're still kind of research technology, a little bit esoteric. Likewise with some of our other innovations in musical instruments. I'm going to show you what I think is just an amazing, amazing piece of technology. This is work by a postdoctoral researcher in my lab, Andrew McPherson. Now, Andrew did his PhD in music composition. He also did his master's in electrical engineering. And what he wanted to do as a composer was try to create new sounds out of a traditional instrument, such as the piano. Piano's a great instrument, right? Piano's been around for hundreds of years, developed over hundreds of years of performance practice. But there are certain things you can't do with a piano. Once you've hit those keys, once that hammer hits the string, there's very little you can do to affect the sound at that point. So a piano, for example, cannot, once you press a note, you can't grow louder on that same note or that same chord. You can't crescendo on a single note. You can't do things such as vibrato or other effects. It's a standard grand piano. You can do this on any piano. It's non-destructive. But what we're doing is we're using electromagnets to also actuate the strings. So you can play it just like a normal piano. The hammers will hit the strings and it'll sound great. But you also have additional ways to actuate the sound. The electromagnets are positioned over each note and can cause the strings to vibrate independently. And then with that control, you can get all sorts of new sounds that are totally impossible on a traditional piano. So if we can turn it up just a little bit, because I think this is a little quiet. Crescendoing on each note. After each note, he presses a little more to the key. It's what we call aftertouch. Every synthesizer has aftertouch. Pianos don't, but now they do. So we're gliding between notes on the piano, right? Those keys don't exist, but we can hit the notes in between. We can hit those frequencies in between. Vibrato, obviously, impossible on a traditional piano. So here we're playing harmonics on the individual strings, which is, again, impossible on a traditional piano. If you ever played a stringed instrument, you can accent harmonics with positioning your finger. So it's really, and it's the sound off the video doesn't do it justice because it's completely acoustic. There's no speaker, involved. There's no, I mean, there's electronic amplification of the electromagnets, but there's no speaker involved. So every sound you hear is mechanically actuated, coming acoustically through the soundboard of the piano. It's a richer sound that you can get off of a synthesizer. So again, come to our lab, visit, and we'll give you a demonstration. Okay, the other interface project I have to talk about, of course, is our work with robots. We do a lot of fun projects with robots. We have a couple of different robots of different shapes and sizes. We built a lot of beat tracking systems, so we figured we would hook up our beat tracker to the robot so the robot could move in time with the music, or really dance. So that video doesn't show it, but it's again doing that analysis in real time. So what we do when we bring out the robot for demos, and we just actually hosted the Philly Robotics Expo on Monday, so we had the demo out. You can hook up an iPod, and you can play your music straight from your iPod. It'll dance along the iPod. You can skip whenever you want, and it'll still stay in time with the beat. This is a relatively small robot. This is what's called a Robonova. It's about that tall. We're really fortunate that we have a much larger robot, or really several much larger robots, and this is a great collaboration we have with the University of Korea and support from the National Science Foundation for this. We have these 7 adult-sized humanoid robots. And by adult size, I mean like 4'5", so short adult, but still, pretty substantial. And they can do some pretty amazing things. They also do some really, really dumb things too. Robots are nothing but computers with motors, right? And so, how you program them, the behaviors that you try to endow them with is completely dependent on the developer. So we've done a lot of different projects with this. In fact, little plug for tomorrow, one of our Hubo robots, that's what these guys are, is throwing out the first pitch at the Phillies game tomorrow. It's Science Day at the ballpark. So in celebration of the Philadelphia Science Festival, which is also where I'm wearing this I'm an engineer button. Our robot will be out on the field actually throwing out the first pitch. Weather permitting, that's the key phrase, weather permitting. Right? Do a little musical performance with our robot. So maybe you've seen this, maybe not, but hopefully you'll enjoy this. Can I turn it up a little bit? This one's going to need some sound.
Here come old flat top, he come. We're moving up slowly, we got June, high one, holy roller, he got hair down to his knees. Got to be a joker, he just did what he pleased. He wear no shoe shop, he got toe jam football, he got Coca-Cola, say, I know you, you know me. One thing I can tell you is you got to be free. Come together right now over me.
Again, it's a complicated story because obviously it takes a tremendous amount of work to put something like that together. These robots are not easy to program, not easy to deal with, but I think the bigger picture here is that when when people get inspired by something, and we put this together in about a week, 10 days, and starting from scratch. So we actually built those instruments, those kind of Blue Man Group pipes. My students actually built those, did all the programming, all the control for this. Trying to get the robot to play the drums is actually the hardest thing. Not getting it to play the drums. Getting it to play the drums without falling off the stool is actually the hardest thing. But putting all this together, and see, you just like a hackathon, just like, you know, the push before a big release. It's like coming together, pardon the pun, to, you know, for a really creative project. And that's just a lot of fun, and you can, you know, just the ideas start flying, and, you know, the idea to put the screen inside the robot, and you know, to control things in different, the idea for the pipes, all of that came together within that time period. So just the technology really pushes our creativity is what I think that's the really take-home message of that. But please, do put that on Facebook, share that with all your friends. We would love a few more views. I'll take this opportunity to do one more plug, is that Sunday, we're actually doing another really big event as part of the Science Festival, and this is what we're calling the Science of Music. It's, first and foremost, it's going to be a fantastic concert. A jazz quartet of amazing musicians. Will Calhoun is a Grammy Award-winning percussionist. He is the drummer for the band Living Colour, if you remember that from the 90s. Yeah, woohoo! Mark Carey is an award-winning keyboardist. You know, has played at Lincoln Center, played, you know, with phenomenal groups. Stefan Alexander, who's helping me put on this event, is an astrophysics professor. He studies cosmology at Haverford, but is also a virtuoso saxophonist. So it's this great ensemble. But in addition to that, it's called the Science of Music because we're going to do real-time visualizations to try to explain some of the physics and acoustics and other scientific phenomena behind music. So we have, it's going to be projected, just like on a big projector like this, but also we have an iPhone app that's part of the Philadelphia Science Festival app. So if you haven't downloaded this for your iPhone, you should already have, I mean, if you download the Philadelphia Science Festival app, you already have it, but you might need to update. So we're going to do real-time visualizations of key and notes, like that. Again, I don't have any data here. This is a seat map of our auditorium, and we'll be able to position, I mean, once you indicate your position, we're actually going to be taking data from your phones and then plotting the sound field, the acoustic resonance of the hall in real time. So you'll be able to see that. And again, the more people we have, the better that sound field is going to be. And then, again, there's no data on this one, but this is a spectrogram view to show the different frequencies produced by the different instruments. So you can see when, not only when an instrument is playing, but why can I hear that saxophone at the same time as the drums, at the same time as the keyboards? It's because there's separation in the frequency domain. So, and then we'll have other visualizations about rhythm and some other discussions as well. So that's on Sunday at 2 o'clock at Drexel in our building in the Mitchell Auditorium. You can find out more information at the Philadelphia Science Festival there. One last thing, which is that my lab, I have a tremendous group of students, and we think we do some interesting stuff. This is something that is going campus-wide at Drexel, and really even region-wide. We're leading something called the Expressive and Creative Interaction Technologies Center, or EXCITE Center. And it's a university-wide initiative to try to promote research and education at the intersection between technology and the arts, and creativity, and digital media. And so that certainly gaming ties in very strongly to that. But it's more than just research and education. It's about impacting the region and growing the digital creative economy in Philadelphia. And certainly gaming, digital media, web development, app development are all part of that. So by educating students in these skills, by promoting projects like the Science of Music or like crazy robot music videos, we're trying to build more momentum in this region and show that Philadelphia has tremendous assets in technology, in creativity, in digital media, in gaming. Philadelphia is not at all a second-class city in those areas when compared to Boston or San Francisco or New York or Seattle. That Philadelphia has all the ingredients needed to be a first-class city in technology and innovation.
It's funny actually, because I've gone to Northeastern to study mechanical engineering, and in the process of doing that, got very much into the music side of things. And I think that there's something very interesting about the Boston atmosphere of engineering and the attractiveness of the students that go to Berkeley over on Howard Avenue. I think it sort of brings that together, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Yes, remote works. So, this is going to be a bit more of a softer talk. I'm not going to have quite so many hard examples of things, but I wanted to just get you guys to sort of think about the idea of music and the idea of what music means to people and to humans as a species. So let's get started with that. Hello? Is this working? Yeah. There we go. So, my name is Dain Saint. I am a co-founder of a game company here in Philadelphia at 3rd Chestnut called Cipher Prime. We have a few games out right now. Our first game was Auditorium that came out about 4 years ago. It was a game where you would bend streams of light to fill audio containers and then hear different portions of a orchestrated symphony. Very cool little synesthetic experience. From there we moved on to Fractal, which is a puzzle game that generates audio based on how you play. And then our probably most popular title today, Pulse, which is an iPad game that we'll talk about in a bit. Splice isn't out yet, but if you've been to a few of the events this week, we have been showing it off. It is a gene splicing puzzle game. It's less related to music, but it's a lot of fun and quite possibly one of the hardest puzzle games ever created. So please, go to the website, buy something, let me continue to eat, and make these cool things. I want to start off with an example of a song. I want you to listen to this. Okay. I want you to listen to this track, and I want you to just think about it and tell me what you think you're listening to. Tell me what sort of environment you think this is coming from. That is a lot of it, actually. We have this back up. So it is actually quite a bit of that, but this is actually a recording of postal workers, all right? Postal workers. But more importantly, it's a recording of postal workers canceling stamps at the University of Ghana Post Office. This is not a performance, all right? This is just postal workers canceling stamps, right? Literally just a letter comes in, they stamp it and send it down the line. And there was a music anthropologist that was visiting, that was going to another meeting and heard this and said, I have to record this, I have to figure out what this is. And he actually asked them at one point, interrupted them, and said, what kind of music are you playing? Are you guys musicians? Do you do this professionally? And their response was very quizzical, and they said, this isn't music, this is just what we do. This is how they pass the time, all right? And this sort of struck me as a very interesting thing because it shows that music is just a natural part of being human. You don't need to be a musician to express yourself musically. You know, everybody is born with that sort of music. It's an intrinsic part of us, in much the same way that birdsong is, hence the name of the talk. This is the sentence that I would like to see people sort of stop saying. How many people here have said this at some point to somebody, right? So it's something that I definitely just want to get rid of because it's complete bullshit. There is nothing musically that happens in the process of making a song that anybody couldn't do with the talents that they are born with. So I'm going to prove this to you. I'd like you all to sing the alphabet. I'm not joking, really. I want you to sing the alphabet, like right now. So 1 and 2 and A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. Louder. Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. Now I know my ABCs. Next time, won't you sing with me? Right? Congratulations, you're all musicians, all right? This idea that you need some sort of special training to remember a melody, to put lyrics to that melody, to have a sense of cadence and timing, is complete and utter bullshit. And that's the sort of thing that we are trying to change the attitude of with games, all right? Now, I often will tell people that doing music is like doing math. And the first thing that they tell me is like, well, I suck at math. Math is horrible and scary. And that is bullshit. Because everybody can do math. What's 1 plus 4? Math. It's not hard, right? If you can count, you can do math. If you can tap, you can do music. There isn't really anything more complicated than that. Now, obviously, there are mathematicians and there are professional musicians, but just because there are mathematicians doesn't mean that you don't know how to add things or how to take 20% off of Boscov's or whatever it is that you do. You know, you understand the sort of basic principles of math in the same way that you understand the basic principles of music, and that's actually something I'd love to chat with you about. I got this quote from Wikipedia. I actually think it's one of the most useful quotes I've gotten from Wikipedia. That music is an art form whose medium is sound and silence, right? Sound and silence are the only two things you really need to pay attention to. If you can handle that, if you can handle making a sound and then maybe not making a sound, then you can handle any sort of musical concept that comes after that. Learning that, being taught that, is where games can come in. So I want to talk to you a bit about why I decided that I wanted to talk about games and music and using games to teach musicality. It was about a year ago, a little bit more than that, a year and a month now. An app came out on the iPad, and I messed around with it, and this is incredible. The amount of things that you could do with it was just beautiful, and it just made it very easy to create music. And that app was GarageBand. You have a smart guitar, for instance, where you pick a chord, and you press a button, and it plays beautiful Italian arpeggios till morning light. If you want drums, you can shake the iPad, and it will randomize a field and play amazing drum patterns. It is almost impossible to make the thing sound bad. It was very good. It was actually too good. It was so good, in fact, that I was a little insulted as a musician. And I said to my business partner that brought it up to me that this makes music too easy, right? I actually reached the point where I thought that there was some elitism coming from my background as a musician. I'm not a particularly well-trained musician. You know, I took 2 years of piano lessons back in like 7th grade, but since then it's all just been, you know, kind of doing this thing for years on end. But I still sort of felt this sort of exclusivism, and I said, you know, that's wrong. That's not really the right way to be thinking about it, all right? Because as I just said, music is a natural part of being human, so we should embrace anything that makes it easier for non-musical people to express themselves musically. The work that Youngmoo has been doing, the work that's been happening in games at large, has been to bring that experience of being a musician to the layperson. Because you know, you may be in a situation where you haven't had access to musical instruments, you haven't had access to tutors, or even been exposed to large varieties of music that you might have a violin virtuoso waiting to happen in the inner city that doesn't have access to those sort of tutelages. But we're getting new ways of getting to those. We're born musical. People learn that they can't make music. When you're on the playground and you guys are singing, you know, Ring Around the Rosie, none of the kids are looking at you saying, you know, that note is a little flat, maybe you should stop playing Ring Around the Rosie with us. Like that's not a thing that happens. It's only as we get older that we learn that we can't do that. But with games, we can sort of change that idea. We can bring it back to this childlike state. So I want to talk about 3 specific things about music that games are very, very good at teaching. It's rhythm, melody, and composition. So, first off, rhythm. It's innate. And again, I'm going to need your help with this. So, I'm going to try this out. All right, can everybody hear me? Yeah. Everyone hear me all right? Here's what I want to happen. I'm going to split you into 3 sections, all right? So from about the Metroid hat here, all right, you guys are going to stomp, all right? You're going to stomp when I throw my hand down. So give it a shot.
right? Let's try that again. And one more time. That's cool. On this side, from, I guess the aisle over, you're going to clap. We're going to do the same thing. So let's give that a shot, and, right, and, great. In the middle, all right, if you're not stomping or clapping, you're going to make a tss sound for me, if that's okay. The same cue, and, okay. So, we're gonna start off real slow with this. Okay? Like I said, starting off nice and slow. So, all right. Really? So that's
You understand innately this idea of timing, of repeating, of anticipating, right? If I were to continue doing that and, say, for instance, forget to trigger my hi-hats in the center, you would have this anticipation, like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to go. And that's because we have mechanisms that allow us to feel that rhythm that are very human and very organic. DDR capitalize on that. You know, we had an entire generation of people saying, I can't really dance. Well, maybe you can if I just give you instructions on a beat-by-beat basis. Guitar Hero took that idea another step further and said, well, I can't really play music. Well, if I give you a plastic guitar and take out all the strings and give you only 5 things that you can hit, it's really hard to screw it up. So it gives you this idea, it takes away that barrier to entry. It takes away the things that make it so that it's difficult for you. And with Pulse, we went a step further than that and said, I'm not going to give you a guitar. All I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some dots, and you're going to tap the dots in time with the music. It's a very simple idea. Now, don't get me wrong, it gets harder, but at its core, a very, very simple idea, tapping dots in time with music. To go on a slight tangent here, we showed off Pulse in the public around the first time, about a year ago at the Too Many Games Expo in Oaks, PA, which is supposed to be at the Greater Philadelphia Area Convention Center, but it's like an hour and a half away. I'm not really sure how that still counts as Philadelphia, but anyways, we went there and we're showing it off. Kids, old people, young people, whatever. And I watched a 50-year-old guy come up, play with the game for about, I don't know, 10 seconds or so, and then walk off. He left it. And I was perplexed by that. And I asked, oh, like, well, wouldn't you like to play it a bit more? And he said, no, and he got kind of shaken up and left. Because he had already learned that he couldn't play. He had already learned that he was bad at games, or that he was bad at music, or bad at both of them. And so being confronted with the music game, he already had this idea of, I can't do it. Meanwhile, later that day, I watched a 60-year-old boy teach a 4-year-old girl how to play Pulse. And he'd only himself been playing it for about 2 minutes. So this idea that we're doing something that's so complicated by being musicians, by creating music for people, that can't be attained by people outside of the field is a little off. So it's something that I personally want to try and fix with the games that we're putting out. I don't have a slide for it here because I'm bad at making presentations, but we created a game, what did I say, about 2 months ago for the Philly Game Jam, where you have an iPhone and you would hold it with somebody, like a Japanese business card, and one person taps out a beat. And they can tap, they can slide left, they can slide right, and the other person has to match that beat. Very, very simple little prototype. When we give it to people, we have this thing where people are sitting there having basically a drum circle with each other on this device. They're not thinking, oh, it's a music game, oh, I'm bad with rhythm. They're thinking, yeah, this is fun. And those are the sort of barriers that we can sort of break down, especially with tactile feedback, especially with touch devices. So, games can also prove that melody is innate. And we're gonna try this, if that's all right. Hello? Is this on?
So, if you did that before, you can sit this one out. You can just kind of sit back and see what else happened. Everybody else, girls, if you would try this for me. Girls? Ladies? Okay. All right, hang on to that. Gentlemen. Thank you. Right? We get ladies and guys to sing together? Is that gonna can that happen? And one more time. 'Cause I love the way that sounds. See, the cool thing about that,
And there it is. The cool thing about that is that you don't need to know, like, oh, we're in F minor moving through to D sharp major, etc. You don't know, you need to know about that. That doesn't matter, that's irrelevant. What you know is that I'm producing a tone and you can match it. You have the innate ability to pick that up, all right? It's basically this idea of Simon Says. We're very good at pattern recognition. We're very good at mimicking. You know, it's how we learn how to talk. It's how we learn the alphabet with the alphabet song that we had earlier. You know, it's how we learn how to do most of the things when we're children. It's just by mimicking. So you can, as we just showed, match melodies. You can match tones. Absolutely. So people will say, oh, I can't sing. Well, you can match the melodies. As far as learning how to sing, that might take, you know, more effort. But no one should be taught that, oh, I'm tone deaf. That's not true. Only 4% of the population is actually physically tone deaf, actually missing the portion in the inner ear that allows them to have an easy time distinguishing relative pitches. And even those with diagnosed tone deafness can still learn how to replicate pitches with a bit more effort. So now that we know that you can match pitches, why not use singing? Why not use pitch matching as a game input? I wish that I had a really cool thing showing that, but I only had this idea this morning. So that's not going to happen until hopefully the next game jam. So games can prove that composition itself is innate. How many people here played Res? Okay. Res was really trippy. It was a really great game where you go and you shoot things, but as you do that, it produces audio, produces sound effects that are pitched and land on the beat. And each time you play through it, you're going to get a slightly different experience based on how you attack it. And depending on how long you've been playing and how much weed you've been smoking, you might be able to have an idea of, I'm creating this song. I'm going to kill this enemy at this time so I can get that effect. And that is coming out in a new form. There's a game called 4 AM. that was recently shown at GDC by Pixel Junk, the guys that make Pixel Junk Eat and Pixel Junk Shooter. That is a very simple game on a PS3 where you have a move controller, and all you do is stand in front of a visualizer and pluck beats out of the air. I can pull in some synth, I can pull in a drum beat, I can twist the thing and create some effects. And it's, again, almost impossible to make the thing sound bad, but if you know what you're doing, you can make it sound really, really good. And those are the sort of experiences that we should be creating as game designers. So, now we're going to see if we can do a song, if that's all right. Are you guys okay with that? Okay.
So, drum beat. We have you guys, we have you guys, we have you guys, right? So, and. Okay, keep that going.
That is innate within us. Now, obviously, proficiency itself is a learned skill, but you have the ability within you to do music, to understand that. It doesn't take a lot of coaxing, right? So, why not make games to teach that skill? I haven't done anything here tonight that couldn't easily be taught in the game. You know, matching rhythms, matching beats, matching tones, matching melodies, and that's all without any sort of, electronic interface. And we can do that in person. There's nothing stopping us from doing that with the game. So let's make some games, all right? Let's make games that teach you how to sing, games that teach you actually how to dance, how to play instruments, how to compose. And in doing that, we can become more musical and have a little bit more of attention paid to our own humanity. So that's basically the talk.
Very cool.
Is just chat with you for a bit, and especially about some of the ridiculous things that you guys are doing over at Drexel, because like I mentioned before, I did go to school for engineering, and so I'm really interested in this sort of boundary or meshing of science and math and music. So.
Yeah, it's, for some reason, I kind of feel like that these divisions that people ascribe to, left brain, right brain, science, you're a scientist, you're you're a mathematician, you're a musician. This super specialization is a fairly recent phenomenon. Fairly recent. I mean, it used to be that it used to be that everybody sang, no matter what. That's how you got your music, right? You just sang. You sang, you know, and not even that long ago. I mean, in the early 20th century, that's what you got. That's what you did. Your family got together and you sang. So this age of hyper-specialization now, where oh gosh, you have to be really, I'm a bad musician because there are better people than I loved, by the way, everything that you just said up there. I love that talk. Because everybody is a musician. And I don't know, it's in a way it's almost trying to rediscover, I think, what has always been part of human education, the human condition, which is that we have many talents. Everybody has multiple interests. I mean, how many of you just do one thing with your life? You do many different things, right? And this idea that you can't be, both an engineer and a musician or a scientist and an artist, I think is ridiculous on its surface. So, and now, unfortunately, the academic institutions haven't necessarily caught up with that. And so the pathways for people, that silo you in just as hey, freshman year, you have to pick a major, right? And I think that's just an unfortunate sort of historical artifact, and that's actually something that, again, you can never accuse me of not having lofty ambitions, but that's something that we're trying to change at Drexel. I know it's not going to take 1 year, 5 years, maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years, but the idea that you have to pick one thing that you're going to be really, really good at.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I quickly find when we're making our games and when we're beta testing is the unwillingness of people over the age of, say, 19 to play. To how difficult it is to say, hey, I have this game, won't you play with me? And this sort of fear that people have of doing it wrong that keeps, I think, a lot of people from pursuing these things. And I think I remember back to when it wasn't actually that long ago that I was going to go pick my major, and my thought was like, oh, there's all this stuff that I want to do, and you want me to pick a major at a point where I can't even pick out 2 socks that match, and that's going to sort of determine my path for the rest of my life. And so this idea of specialization, it's especially prevalent in the game industry, where you'll have a company like an EA or like a Ubisoft, where you have hundreds and hundreds of artists, and you ask them, what have you worked on for the last 3 years? And they'll say, oh, I've modeled footballers' noses in FIFA for the last 4 generations of the product. And that is the extent of professional expression that they get. Now, I look at that, and I look at the amount of people that I see that are frustrated on their path, and frustrated with the sort of lack of a creative outlet. And I think back to I remember at one point in history we had this renaissance where people were like, well, I'm just gonna do everything, you had Leonardo da Vinci. I was like, oh, I'm gonna sing, and I'm gonna paint, and I'm gonna make sculptures and crazy engineering things. I'm going to get into a little bit of that surgery thing that seems to be hot these days, and I'm going to war with a couple of young, good-looking boys. And it's like, but he was okay. He was allowed to do that. You were allowed to express yourself in that way. And I think that for whatever reason, and especially in this country, we've lost a lot of those outlets for expression. And I think that with games, with this idea of play, of making it fun, taking away that what happens if I screw up from people, we can really start to try and reclaim some of that youthfulness, some of that childlike abandon.
Absolutely. So, wow, you hit on 3 or 4 big themes there, and I'll try to hit some of them. One is this notion of people being afraid of being wrong, right? That yes, you get hammered with that far too much, far too often, and far too early in life. I have a 4-year-old, and I've learned so much just from watching him. And I like to think that I've never lost my childlike side, and others, my students in
To be
particular.
fair, you do work on robot
robots,
silver
yeah,
bands.
exactly.
So
I
I think that's safe to say.
I should tell you also about the photo shoot that we did with the robots. We actually did a photo shoot of the robots doing the Abbey Road crossing over. So that'll be the cover of Drexel magazine next week. No, I mean, absolutely. So we instill this idea that there's a wrong answer far too easily and far too often. And when in life there are seldom clear right and clear wrong answers. And part of this goes back to education. Part of this goes back to our education system, which was developed essentially in the post-industrial revolution for a very, very, very different society. The knowledge was scarce, so we had to provide the knowledge. Right now, knowledge is not scarce. Knowledge is everywhere. You can, as long as you have even a smartphone or any sort of interconnection, the facts are easy to find. And now what we have to instill in people is to be able to use that knowledge appropriately. And I would be the first one to criticize how we've traditionally taught science, technology, engineering, math as being completely misguided. The fact that I could give you a test, and I'm as guilty of this as anyone. I'll give you a problem set or test, and then I will grade it, and then I will say that these things are right and these things are wrong, right? And of course, that's just emphasized over and over and over again. Whereas performing a piece of music, performing, I always use this analogy, but I'm a trained classical musician, and so I've sung many, many different big symphonic works. But Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, right? There are many, many good ways of performing Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. There are probably many more bad ways of performing Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, but you have to become comfortable with the idea that there's a range of options. You have to explore those expressive possibilities, and that is, the essential part of creative expression. Not being afraid to fail, not saying that I'm going to get the wrong answer in playing Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. There is no wrong answer there. Some people might, think some performances are better than others, but and that's something we do not emphasize at all education levels. I mean, both higher ed and in K-12. So that's a huge thing, and I completely agree with you on that. Now, in terms of, in terms of games as sort of an entryway into creativity and playfulness and recapturing some of that, I do believe that. I think games are a wonderful way of, think of all the different sensory experiences you go through when playing a game. I mean, whether it's a music-driven game or not. I mean, you've got audio, you've got visual stimulation, you've got touch, you've got tactile feedback. You're exercising your senses, and that's how we've evolved as creatures, is to use all those senses and to process that information. So games, by activating all of those simultaneously, are a wonderful way to learn, to explore, to play as well.
Well, I mean, I do think it's rather telling that some of the most popular games in the past few years have been games like Minecraft and Little Big Planet, and
right. Open-ended.
games that are like, well, I guess there's a game here, but at the same time, you can just go and build Starship Enterprise if you've got enough time. I think that sort of speaks to that desire for expression.
Absolutely. But just like games are maturing as well. I mean, the art form of games, of video games, relatively new in the history of media, of course. But I mean, the same thing happens with movie and music and televisions, is that, there's bifurcation. That of course there's the easy path, the quick and easy path to the dark side, right? That you have the big studios who are going to put out the titles and who are going to do derivative stuff year after year after year. But the beauty of that is that then there's alternatives. And that this is the really, really wonderful thing about iOS and I'm counting Apple family, but that has opened so many opportunities again for smaller development houses, indie developers, individuals who have creative ideas and give you a platform to easily express those. And that's the amazing thing about iOS. So I think there's always still going to be the quick and easy path is always there. It's just too tempting For for EA to put out Madden 2013, 2014, 2000, that's very, very predictable, and they will still continue to make money in that. But I am hopeful that through these other vehicles, through whether it's different platforms or even just more people gaining that exposure, becoming inspired to become developers, to understand that, hey, I have, let's say, some musical talent, I have some engineering talent, I can bring these two things together, I can bring together my talent for visual arts and express themselves through a really wonderful medium here, where all of those things are valued.
One of my favorite things, probably actually my most cherished thing about making games, is when I get to watch somebody learn how to play one of the games. When I get to see, that exact moment where it's like, oh shit, I get it. And they get so excited, and they have that sort of triumphance of, I learned this. It wasn't spoon-fed to me, it was something that I figured out, something that I use my own intellect and senses to get towards. And I feel like there is an awful lot that we can take from that experience in games, and things that we already sort of take for granted in games that can be applied to the way we teach everything else. For instance, if you're playing, I don't know, let's say Assassin's Creed or whatever, there's an open-ended area, but before that, it's like, well, you have to learn these things. And when you've figured it out, when you've learned that, then you can move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
However long that takes you. And I look at that and I say to myself, well, I know that because I've already read the manual that if I tap A twice, you'll do a double jump or whatever it is. So I don't necessarily need to go to a tutorial. And the game doesn't force me to. It's only there if I need it. And I look at the way we have our schools set up, and I see, K through 12, you're going to march through, and here's where you're going to hit, pre-algebra, and then algebra, and then geometry, and then pre-calculus, and fall off at some point. But I wonder, what it would be like for kids to go to a school where there are no grades, only prerequisites. Where it's like, well, you know how to add, so now you can take your multiplication class. And if you got it in the first 2 weeks and you totally understand it, you can go there and do that. You can advance at your own pace, and from there we have, you look at games, people will get their enjoyment from it. Not everybody's going to see every part of it, not everybody's going to go and collect all 150, magic feathers. But some people will. Some people will go that extra mile. Some people will just go through and get, I got the experience I was going to get through this game, and I've learned everything I was going to. And I wonder, what sort of steps we can take to creating that sort of learning environment.
Yeah. Well, I think there is hope for the future. I mean, even in a school district with as many challenges as Philadelphia.
Can we just drop funding for our school districts?
Yeah, oh God, let's not, we'll all want to hurl ourselves off the building.
Hope, you're saying hope.
Hope. I don't know if you're familiar, I mean, there are some fantastic schools in the Philadelphia School District even. The Science Leadership Academy is an amazing, amazing school. We do a lot of work with them. And really embodies a lot of those principles. That most of your learning is self-guided, self-directed, it's project-based. We don't give you a grade. We assess you on your project, but you have to actually create something to show us you've learned something. Not just, regurgitate the facts that we gave you. So that model has had tremendous success. Science Leadership Academy, really high, a much higher graduation rate than the rest of Philadelphia School District. Still demographically reflects the diversity of Philadelphia. So it's not just, yes, you have to apply and that you have to be selected, but still, it's one of the few success stories around here. And so there is hope, and people are looking at that model and saying, wow, how can we spread that further? And it really requires questioning your initial assumptions. And then, yes, there's far too much baggage in terms of traditional education. Now, the other point to bringing games into this, yeah, games can really be used in so many different ways for learning and for education. I mean, there's countless kids games out there, and I don't know how many are on my iPad right now because my wife and son just keep downloading them, and they're just, it's great, it's amazing. But there's also the notion that things really do have to be individualized, that people learn in different ways. you know, and there's tons of research on this, just learning styles, learning methods, and that's another area of great potential, I think, where you have certain games that present something, you know, primarily visually, or another game where it's based on, you know, timing and feedback that way, or others that are use sound and musical intelligence. I think there's a lot of potential there, but again, the really, really hard thing. And well, I'll preface this by saying that I think of all the things that we've talked about today or seen today, you know, any of our research projects, any of the great games you've put together, or any of the items mentioned, the hardest of any of those, by far, is education. Right? Teaching a robot to play, you know, Blue Man Group pipes, that's kind of hard. It takes some time, you know, you got to know some stuff. But, you know, figuring out how to impart knowledge onto a lot of people simultaneously is by far a much, much harder problem. So, and getting teachers then, I mean, who really are, you know, well, I mean, you know, I could go on and on for how we undervalue teachers and all that. But since teachers have that tremendous responsibility of, you know, reaching your class, and everybody is different. Everybody's going to pick up something at a different rate or learn something in a different way. I believe, I hope for the future, that our teachers are more like developers. That our teachers can use these tools to then quickly adapt, customize, use their knowledge, use their curricula to curate information, curate experiences for highly individualized, or, you know, small groups, or you know, speaking to each student. Now, we are very far from that goal, from that stage, but that's, again, my hope for the future.
It's actually really interesting that you mentioned that, because now I'm looking at it. I tutored for a while, and I tutored for SAT, which the first thing I always told the students was that the SAT is a test of how well you can take the SAT.
Yep.
And once you understand that, you do marvelously well. As another tangent from that, that actually makes it so that I can't use Rosetta Stone anymore, because I'm a lot better at multiple choice questions than I am at learning languages.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
So that's another gripe. But the thing that I'm looking at now is that when you're, like, let's say you have a brother that's 2 years ahead of you, right? And he goes through the math class, and then you come to the math class 2 years later. He's going to say, oh, you know, it's October. They're probably going to be going through polynomials at this point. Here are all my notes from 2 years ago, and they will completely and utterly apply to everything that you're doing. And if you look at development, we don't do that. You know, we reuse some code, but by and large, each project, each game requires a different solution, requires a different sort of plan of attack. And so the idea that I can use wholesale a program that I wrote 2 years ago to solve a problem I'm having today is absolutely preposterous, but we do it all the time with our schools.
Yeah, it's the quick and easy path. It's always there. I mean, the
Madden 2014
of education. It's the easiest solution, right? And again, I'm as guilty of this as anyone. I'm not going to stand here and say that, you know, I don't use my curriculum from last year. Of course I do. I use my notes from last year. I use some of the same problems from last year.
Well, you would want to think that, I was teaching this last year, and half the students had a really hard time at this point. You would want to change the way you taught it so that the next year it would be a little bit better.
Absolutely. And again, many pressures conspire against that. But I think the challenge is to, have the skill set, have the knowledge to understand, you know, what can you do? What does the technology enable? Technology right now still enables really mass distribution of multiple choice tests. That's pretty much where we're at in terms of education technology, right? And this pipe dream that you know, we'll have robots teaching our children, I think it's still just that, it's a pipe dream. But again, this is where creativity and innovation really comes into it. That if you have a good game designer, a great teacher, somebody with a varied skill set who can pull some of these things together. Yeah. So every year, I try to go through sometimes I just don't have time. Try to revise my notes, do things the things that didn't work, discard those, iterate. We do this all the time in development, right? You take what works, you refine your code, and you iterate. Not the same as refactoring. I would say refactoring is a different thing, and not such a huge fan of
A
refactoring.
lot of our system could use a lot of refactoring.
Yeah.
to be fair, but-
Yeah, absolutely. So much right now to do something in a classroom that's good and innovative, right? And it's just and the easy path is just a little too easy. We have to make it easier for teachers to use new technologies, to new tools, to become software developers. And that's very hard because becoming a good software developer takes a tremendous amount of time and commitment and training and all that. But to take that energy, to make, computers and technology and robots are good at making the really redundant, boring things automatic, right? There's a lot more we can do along that so that, a teacher's energy, a developer's energy, a professor's energy can be spent doing what humans are good at, creating and then, planning and imparting new visions onto things. Now that's a very nebulous sort of thing. But having tried to work with teachers in classrooms, done a lot of individualized work. Man, I mean, writing a piece of educational software is just I don't know what I'm going to steal Steve Jobs' phrase, but it's a big bag of hurt, right? That every system is. You walk into a school, they don't understand technology at all, and their systems are locked down. You need an admin password to install anything. We've actually, in developing some of our stuff, we've found ways to hack around that, right? Just so we can get something that we think is cool. And
I got in trouble for that in high school at one point. So.
Absolutely. I mean, the fact that there are firewalls, there are ports shut off in high school. That's a whole other discussion. But getting people to understand both technology, the fundamentals of technology and the limits of it, but the creative capacity as well. And it's a very, very hard thing. I mean, that's one of the reasons we're trying to do the thing we're doing at Drexel is to try to build a core of that and build around that. So it's not going to happen overnight. But again, when you give teachers the freedom, I mean, I'll use, again, Science Leadership Academy as an example. When you give teachers the freedom, the flexibility, I mean, you need the time to commit to this, to be creative. Creativity is not inspiration. Creativity doesn't happen overnight or in just a flash of, the light bulb, whatever. Creativity is a process. Anyone who's developed anything good knows that, or worked on anything good knows that. That maybe you got some initial insights, and maybe they were completely wrong, and it was only through that process of working through it. Hey, I can't use this data structure for that. That's not going to work. I got to try it this way. It is a process, and so you have to give people the room to do that. And
a lot of that is also just making it so that people are less afraid to fail. I mean, you're not going to try something and be okay with it, screwing up and then try it again if you're constantly being told, like, well, you need to have this thing due in the next 4 hours, and if you don't, you're going to fail, and then your parents will disown you. Like that sort of idea really stifles creativity because you're then afraid to do the things that lead to creative, innovative solutions.
Exactly. I think that we have, I don't know, I'm going to throw something out there right now that I haven't really thought through. But
well, it's okay, because if you're wrong, then you'll fail you. And
I'll fail. But see, fortunately, I'm in a position where I fail all the time. I fail every single day. I feel like I fail almost on an hourly basis because
I sympathize.
My email is piling up. I'm not responding to a bunch of things I'm supposed to be doing. There's big things happening.
When are we supposed to start at 8?
Yeah, whatever. I was late to this because I was trying to. I fail constantly. But again, I mean that's. Hopefully, eventually you learn that's part of the process. So the thing that I was going to throw out there is that, our systems, whether they're in education or in a lot of our in corporate systems, certainly a lot of development systems, the way they're coded, are designed to do the things that computers would do anyway. They're very rigid, right? SATs, multiple choice tests, things like that, where we can arbitrarily try to quantify things. Computers are very, very, require quantification of things. They are not at all good at the qualitative, which is what we are good at, or at least, have much more instinctual knowledge and, and just neural processing power to assess that. So I think you're right in that, kind of this idea of refactoring education, or really refactoring the way we do lots of things, that these structures have arisen
bureaucracy. Bureaucracy feels robotic and computational because it is. It's designed to take choices away.
It's the same idea. Like, I've gone to, like, for instance, have change the address of my driver's license, and something gets lost in the mail, and I can't, as a programmer, I'm sitting there and it's like, that's a lost packet.
Yeah,
That's
exactly. Well, I mean,
exactly the same sort of thing.
isn't it hilarious that oftentimes we choose to interact with machines for those sorts of tasks rather than humans? Isn't it hysterical that I would much rather deal with a web interface to change my address than actually talk to a human being about that? But I mean, that's okay. Some things are.
I'd rather have a human being make me a sandwich.
Yeah, exactly. So, again, I think, things are evolving, but we need to try to keep the machines good at what they're good at. And that's fine. I'm fine with changing my address via the DMV. I'd much rather do it on the website than actually having to go to the DMV and stand in a queue and talk to a real person. But the danger, right, is, and I'm not trying to be dramatic or anything, but the danger is when people have a misconception about that. To say that the machines can actually do something that they're just totally not capable of. Standardized testing is kind of a machine, right? And it's trying to quantify something that is essentially impossible to quantify. And I think, again, that's one of the perspectives that having some experience in the arts brings. That there are certain things that you just don't quantify, that can't be quantified, and shouldn't be. And that's okay. That's really okay. And that understanding that, becoming comfortable with that is going to, again, it leads to innovation, leads to creativity. By understanding what I can do quantitatively, succinctly, mechanically, versus what I can't do. Like these things. Again, in your games, obviously it's running on a computer, so much of it is controlled, some of it, it's dictated. But the human response to that is something that is, completely out of your control. And having an interaction where the human can impart, now I'm sorry, moving beyond your games, which are, you tap, just with Pulse, for example, you're tapping on the beat. But let's take something, a compositional idea, a compositional tool like GarageBand or Meter Play it, and then allow me to explore my creative options from there. There is nothing wrong with that, I don't think.
I feel like you guys have come to see a talk on music and games, and we've got your talk on games.
We've got a little off track.
But I hope
we should give them a chance. Right?
So if you'd like to steer us back on track, this would be the time. Can we take any questions?
The structure that we have for music, the classical music, the chords, the triads, the 12-tone scale, why does it have to be like that? Why can't even the games break out of that box? And, it's an infinite number of notes between C and the next C. It's not a finite number of notes there. And why can't these games go into the next level and take us to the beyond where traditional music has really not taken on?
I look at that and I say, like, man, I would really love to be able to do some, even temperament stuff and non-traditional tunings and things of that nature and really explore that space. But what I find as a developer, partially because I like to have people, a wide variety of people play, and partially because doing that means that they give me money, is that when I present things that are a little too weird, people will shy away from it because they are still in that sort of mindset where it's like, that sounds wrong. And to teach them, like, oh no, it's okay, it can sound like that, at the same time as trying to break through the barrier of, you can do music at all, I think it becomes a bit more difficult. I think that if we can start on one side and say, you can do music, then we can move into, you can do whatever you want with music as well. But I would like to see things move in that direction where we can be a bit more free.
Let me follow up on that, just one thought, which is that, of course, I just lost it. No, with music, it's about, it's a combination of access and exposure as well. Yes, music still happens, no matter what. We've had, music has been cut through many public school programs, and music continues to exist. Right, I believe that. But it's not as rich an experience. You don't necessarily get exposed to the broader knowledge and the richness of the forms. You get exposed to what you get exposed to. You get to what the radios, what's on the radio, what your friends give you, you know, what there is. But there's such a much richer world out there, and that's part of the purpose of education, I think, is to get students to recognize that there is a much, and not what we know, what we don't know, right? That there's so much more out there. The more I know, the less I know, right? And I think that's part of it.
Started with was a piece that was given to me by a professor who I took a Music of Asia course with back at Northeastern, and it's something I never would have heard any other way, and I wouldn't have had that sort of, you know, aha moment, like, oh, music is a thing that anyone can do. So like that I think is the purpose of where education falls in, is to not to reinforce what you know, but to say, hey, like you said, hey, there's all this stuff that you don't know, maybe you should check that out too.
Yeah, and then tying into one of the other points you brought up, the alternate representation of music, different tunings, different scales. I mean, I'll call them more advanced, even though I don't really believe they're more advanced. Are built upon prior knowledge. I think that there's an easier entry point with the common forms that we're associated with, and to really understand, micro tuning, or to understand different scales, different forms of harmony. You need to understand. You need some foundation for that. It's not just going to be aha. Now, I'm all for games or apps or activities that highlight some of those differences, but I would have to say that without some basic introduction or educational aspects of that, people don't spontaneously break into 12-tone song. As much as I would like to. I love Schoenberg, but
Remember New Math?
Oh yeah. I went to the high school of New Math.
And they decided, what would make people really understand math at a much more intuitive level is to just do away with the idea of base 10 altogether and say that numbers can be in whatever base, like from the time that you were in 6th grade. And it's like, yeah, but that's not how you generally approach numbers in your day-to-day life. It's the same way with music. You don't tend to hear many, so there isn't that sort of cultural reinforcing that you can do this and it's okay. So yeah, I think that it would be a cool thing to do, but I would like to see more people doing music at all. And then we'll have, I think naturally from that, people will be like, I've been doing this for a while, let's see what happens between C and C sharp. Yeah. So, and a lot of the chip artists do that. SKGB actually does a lot of stuff where it's like, I don't even know what time signature you're in anymore, but this is great. So yeah.
I studied music in college, and I heard lots of this kind of stuff of 15-tone scales and stuff, and it's cool, but it's not really I don't feel it on a very fundamental level, and I've been exposed to a lot of it, and I think that it's just a more difficult thing, and it's kind of like you're not a native speaker of that language. It would be almost like trying to teach a language through a game, which is just kind of a difficult proposition.
Giving stories and developing characters that are relatable and really believable as real people. And I was just wondering if you think there's some intersection with that and what was covered tonight, and what your thoughts on that might be.
I've given another talk entitled Why Your Music Sucks. And it is an exploration of writing music for games. I start talking a bit more about how you use motif and how repetition can move in, and how the elements of music can serve to enhance your story, to enhance your characters. One of the things that comes to mind thinking about this sort of author or auteur direction is this is what I'm trying to say with this game. Our first 3 games, Auditorium, Fractal, and Pulse, are all very much the user trying to create some music. Auditorium, you're still fading in the music I've created. Pulse, you're still playing against tracks, but it's about the user's experience with the music. Splice, I finally put my foot down and said, I'm going to write a soundtrack for this because I want to tell a story. But I do think that there is an intersection between the idea of being a composer for games, saying I want to tell this story, and being a player of the game, saying I too want to tell a story. And then with the game, perhaps you could tell a story together. So I'd like to see more research into how the player can consciously guide the orchestration, guide the background music of what's happening there, rather than just either having it generative or having it completely generative or having it completely pre-composed. An intersection at those 2 points, I think, is what I would like to see, or what I would like to probably try at the next game jam of some sort.
Yeah, no, that would be very cool. I do have one more thought about this, and that is that it's a very, very different process composing for a game or something where you have so much more variation, right? Film composers have tried to write for games, and most of those aren't such great soundtracks because they're used to having a very linear sort of linear progression of things. So I think it's a very, very different art form, very different skill to be able to take, a smattering of motifs, and you don't know exactly when they're going to happen, right? And linking them to game elements like that, but in a way that still gives you something compelling. That way, where it's not just sort of this, oh, obviously I went into the dark room and the music changed, right? Which is, how the Doom soundtrack works, or, where it's very, again, they're very, very simplistic choices. And I think there's, the best video game composers are able to weave things in a very, very new and interesting way. And without relying on, there are certain people who, control freaks who say it has to go this way, and this is the way I want my music to sound. And then, if you let that go and say, hey, I'm gonna sit back and watch it evolve and see, if I can weave a couple of different structures together, then you can get something really, really interesting. But you're not tied to that, one way of it happening.
I mean, on that note, I'm trying and struggling and failing to remember the name of the artist. But there was an artist that got very tired of listening to his music over and over again in the process of making it. And he knew, like, oh, when I release this, people will remix it. And that's kind of cool. But I get tired of those too, because there's only so many of them. So what he was working on was a project in which he basically just made the stems, and each person that downloads the album gets a different remix of the album. And I think that is exactly the intersection that we're talking about. Like, these are the elements that I have created, and now they are yours. I think that idea is sort of where we're looking to hit that sort of sweet narrative spot with music and games. I mean, if you're making a game like Paul's or like a rock band or Guitar Hero, that music can be as repetitive as it damn well pleases, because the idea is that you're going to play against that song over and over again. But if you're doing something like Mass Effect, where the player is going to be sitting, with their eyes in the Ludovico thing for 25 hours playing the thing, trying to get Captain Shepard to have the biggest gun in the universe, you're going to want to have that music be more dynamic and have it change it. I think that if you look at something like a Res or Everyday Shooter, where it's a lot more abstract, you can get away with it being entirely generative. Something like a Mass Effect, where you want it to be cinematic, you have to sort of toe that line where you're creating a bit more and guiding it a little bit more, but still, you just don't want it to get annoying after a while.
I'll not answer your question, but throw this out there. I mean, I think it relates. Far too much emphasis in I think, not just in video gaming, in many forms of media, is on the visual. And when I was working at the startup company before I became a professor, we're doing these metalware things, and they would put these insane processing requirements for audio, saying that, okay, we're going to devote, at most 5% of our processing time to audio. That's it. Sorry, the rest we got to use for graphics. Yeah, and that's ridiculous. It's just absolutely ridiculous. That sound is, to my mind, just as important as the sound and music is just as important as the visual. Obviously, I have a little bias there, but there actually has been research that you can present people the very same visual, right? And you change the sound, and they perceive that one of them is better. because you've changed the sound for the better. Right? Sound is incredibly important, and I think it too often gets short shrift. I mean, not just in gaming, but certainly many game studios, again, have this hard cap. We can only devote so much processing to audio, and they do not really explore the options that are available to them with these massive processors that we have and with the algorithms that we can do. You know, you can do really, really amazing things with that. So that's how I'll answer that question.